Hello everyone, and thank you for joining our today's webinar. Today we are talking about Rook-Knight Endgame tactics. Okay, let me adjust some settings, just a sec, like that. Okay, it seems it's better now, maybe. Yeah, well, it seems okay. Please let me know if the video and audio quality is good and you can hear and see me well. So people are joining, perfect. And before we start with our today's topic, which is the Rook and Knight tactics, I would like to talk about the homework. Thank you, guys. So I would like to talk about the homework. So if you remember, last time we were talking about how to attack on when you are castle to the same side. And we have two positions as a homework, so 1 and 2, so this and this. And oh, actually, no. Well, this is the position we had. So Queen e6 was played, and I was asking you how white should continue with their attack. This is exactly what we need to talk about. Okay, so yeah, let's work on this topic first. By the way, if there is anyone who joins the webinar for the first time, could you please let me know your rating and which country you are from? Okay. Let's work on this position. So if you remember, it was d takes c4 played, and then there was a question what white should do to initiate the attack. Well, some people would probably say that knight d6 is a possibility. It blocks the d7 pawn and probably forces black to capture on d6, which means that the pawn on d7 is blocked. Well, this is what you can do if you play positionally. But if you want to initiate the attack, it makes sense to start this attack right away by doing a bishop sacrifice. So bishop h6, this is the move that was played in that game between David Bronstein and Paul Keres. So, well, black has a pawn down and is likely to lose if they don't accept this sacrifice. Well, the pawn on c4 is likely to be lost. So g takes h6. Now, how to continue then? Well, ideally, we should checkmate on h7 by doing something like that. But in this exact position, such a strategy won't work. There is a pawn on c4. Also, there is a knight covering h7. So that's why it makes sense to continue with this move, queen d2. The whole point of this position is based on the inability of the king to move to g7, because then knight f5, king goes back, and after queen h6, it seems that the checkmate is unavoidable. While we are threatening with this, they can cover it, for example, with knight e8 move. Well, knight e7 check, queen e7, queen h7 is a checkmate. Okay, so if not king g7, then how to play? Because once the queen comes to h6, it seems that the attack is decisive. Okay, before we continue with this line, first of all, I want you to realize that such an attack is possible because of the material majority on the king side. So you have material advantage on the king side. These pieces are ready to start the attack, and there is only knight and the pawns defending the king. So that's why by sacrificing the bishop, you expose the king. And well, in the game, it was knight h7, which only allowed white to continue with this move. Then it was f5. But before we continue with this, let's talk about the best option. So obviously, the pawn on h6 is completely lost. So something like that doesn't really help. Well, just what, h3, for example. Yeah, h3 seems to be enough. So bishop g5, f4. Two pieces are hanging simultaneously. Okay, so knight c5 was the best move. Of course, black sacrifices the pawn, but they are able to control the center. And now, if let's say we play queen h6, they can play bishop e4 and get rid of one of the defenders. That would be the best strategy. Probably white would continue with knight f5 to threaten a checkmate on g7. So bishop takes f5. So bishop takes f5. Well, bishop takes bishop, rook e8, and then white has to develop their attack slowly, maybe by doing a rook leave. It's not a winning position, but it's definitely favorable for black, for white, sorry. So this move, then, well, rook e8, then, well, if knight e8, it's a checkmate. So probably what? Queen e8, but then queen f6, and it seems that white is winning. Well, yeah. So, well, it's not a winning position, but white is much better here. This is what could happen in the game. However, instead of that, knight h7 was played, which seems logical because black expands space, but at the same time allows the white pieces to enter the king side. So f5, knight takes f5, threatening a checkmate, rook sacrifice for the knight. And well, so it's a rook for, and one pawn for two minor pieces. That's why slowly, move by move, white succeeded with their attack. So this is played in order to do a rook lift. Bishop g5. Queen goes there. Queen f6. Okay, and knight d6. Threatening with this. Bishop goes there. Queen g4. Now threatening with this move. Well, and slowly white won that game. The key idea was to find bishop h6, which would allow you to open the enemy king side. Now the second position to discuss. Well, it seems that the attack is strong, but at the same time it is stuck. Do you have any ideas of how to continue? Because actually nobody sent any ideas regarding this homework. Probably it was too complicated to you. So yeah, please send me as a direct message. Okay, so there is a suggestion by John. John suggests to play g6. That's absolutely right. The key idea here is that actually both pawns are pinned. If f takes g6, it's pawn takes g7 check, king goes there, and well, then it can be probably, well, you can promote to a queen, but I think the best way is just to take on h7, king takes, and then you promote to a knight, delivering a fork as well as a double check. So king goes to h6. Well, you can do this, check, this, then it's another fork. King escapes, but the position is completely losing. Well, maybe the king doesn't go to h6, maybe it goes there and we just take here, but anyway, it's winning. So the f-pawn is pinned, so how to defend? Because queen h7, it will be played on the next move. There are no checks which could make any sense. Capturing on f6 doesn't work, so it's something with the h-pawn. Well, h6 seems like the only way. So how would you play them? Okay, so thanks, John. Yes, it's queen takes h6. So threatening with a checkmate, the pawn has to take, and then it's g7. So if king goes to h7, it is the same strategy. Well, we promote to a knight and then capture this, ending with extra everything. So so that's why the king goes to g8. However, after that, we can still capture on f8, promoting to a queen. So they have to take it. Otherwise, queen g7 is a checkmate. King takes, and after rook d8, the black king cannot escape. So the only thing they can do is just to block. And of course, this is a winning position. So here, white was able to convert their attack to a material advantage and later won that game. Okay, fine. So that was the homework. I think we won't cover the whole game because today we have a lot of tactical positions to discuss. Let's start. So, well, when it comes to Rook and Knight and games, it's mainly about knight forks. Of course, there can be distraction, there can be a pin, there can be a double attack of two pieces. For example, when the king attacks rook and knight simultaneously, and a lot of combinations are based on it. So, well, today we are going to explore typical tactical combinations that may happen. And we start with something really simple. Now, well, black to move, what would you do? So what do we see here? There is a pawn on e6, which is about to be promoted soon, but well, we can block it with 97, for example. What we should notice here, we may notice that these two pieces are located on a distance of a knight fork. So if the knight comes to g4, this is a fork. However, g4 is protected with this rook, but it's also attacked with our rook. Mhm. Okay, so what suggestions do we have? Okay, one is knight f6, rook f5 check by Brian. Okay, rook f5 is interesting, but what's the purpose of this move? Let's say they continue with the king move there. So we can, well, rook g1 doesn't work, and well, looks like we don't win anything. Yeah, so and the other suggestion is knight f6, knight g4. So that's right. So it was so simple. Knight f6, attacking the rook. Well, the rook has to move, and then it's knight g4. And now they have to sacrifice this rook for a knight. Why? Well, if they move the king, then after knight h2, king h2, the king is cut off. So, and here I think it's just rook e5. Yeah, rook e5, knight d4, c5. Rook goes there, check. King b6, and they have to, well, they may play e7, and if we take, they play this move. What do you think? How should we continue in this position to get enough material advantage? Because if we take, they promote. If we take here, they take, well, probably it's a winning position, but the H pawn is quite dangerous. Okay, so there is a suggestion by John to do this, and then the rook goes to the second rank. Well, it should be winning, rook c2, but the H pawn is quite dangerous. I'm sure there is a better way to play after rook f8. D3 was suggested by Michael. Well, D3, but well, you lose. Well, okay, C takes D3, C takes D3. Let's say you lose there. Then, well, rook e7, and they play this move. Well, after rook e3, I still believe it's winning, but again, there is a much better thing to play. Okay, yeah, so thanks, John. It's rook g4. So it's rook g4 because we want to capture this pawn. Now, if they just play king h3 to protect it, we double, and this is how we hold this pawn, ending with extra rook. However, if they promote, we have to take this queen, rook takes, but rook h4, and they don't have the h pawn, which means they don't have any counterplay at all. And, well, black is completely winning because of two extra pawns. So actually, there is no need to calculate it. You just need to realize that it's possible to stop the e pawn, and here you gain the exchange. And then black is winning. So the pawn isn't so dangerous, especially when you can play rook e5 move and simply stop it. Well, it's also rook e4. Okay, fine. So it's about knight 4x. Let's continue with another simple combination. And this time it was David Bronstein against Mark Taimanov. So black to move. Black is a pawn up, but if, let's say, the knights are exchanged, and it's rook versus rook, I mean, rook and pawns versus rook and pawns in game, then 4 versus 3 is technically winning, but it there are so many complications, and you may not win in practice. So how to get the second extra pawn to be able to win this endgame? What do you think? Oh, I'm reading all your comments, as well as on you, well, here in the chat and on YouTube. Okay, so thanks for your suggestion, Georgios. I'm waiting for more students. Well, what do we see here? Well, this king is better placed. It is able to defend these weaknesses. So this king doesn't defend the pawn on f4, and the g2 is potentially a weak pawn. However, it seems that it should be a knight move because the knight is hanging. Well, which knight move we can choose? Well, we can try to exchange, but again, I said that it may be not a winning position. Well, you can try to do this move. You can try to do this. Well, a rook f2 cannot be played right away because the knight is under attack. Okay, so looks like a proper suggestion. Okay, yes, there was a suggestion by Georgios, Brian, and John about knight d5. Well, the idea is first to attack this pawn, but also to create a simple tactical idea of a knight for pawn e3. So, for example, how to defend? Let's say they try to move the knight somewhere and defend in that way. Well, knight c2, for example. Then it's knight f4, and it is a distraction. You see? It is a distraction. Rook takes rook. Well, here you may say, okay, so yes, we see the distraction, but what if they play knight b4 move? Well, yes, this line requires calculation. So we continue with this. They play this. Now we have this hanging as well as this. How to proceed? Well, okay, it seems that in this position we have to play this move. The king goes closer, but then knight h3 works, and the king has to go back, and both our pieces are safe. So if not king g1, then what else they can do? Looks like both pieces are safe, and we are 3 pawns up. Okay, fine. So knight c2 doesn't work. Well, maybe rook c2 works. Well, rook c2, we just exchange and capture these pawns. So we are 2 pawns up in a knight endgame in a very simple position. Okay, so knight f3 was played in the game. So they wanted to protect the pawn with this rook from c4. However, they missed that the g2 is also a weakness. So here you may suggest playing knight e3, right? Well, knight e3, this move, well, maybe, yeah, this move maybe. Then you take here, he goes there, and well, the position is still winning, but there are some things to have in mind. So knight e5 is coming, knight h4 is a possibility. Also, just taking this knight with rook c3 is kind of a problem. That's why, in order to make the position more simple, black decides to not move the knight from d5 and sacrifices the rook. Now, if king h1, it's okay just to move the rook to f2 and then capture here or there. And if the king takes, it's knight a3 fork. The king moves, and this is a winning endgame with 2 extra pawns. e5 is covered too. Okay, fine. Let's continue. The second game example, this time it was Mark Taimanov playing against Gideon Stalberg. However, Mark Taimanov here made a mistake. So play a better move than Taimanov played. So white to move, and instead of just thinking about simple forks, pins, you need to calculate the line a little bit deeper to realize that you get a winning position. So guys, what do you think? Well, by the first glance, knight a6 seems like a good idea, but we should realize what we do after rook a8 move. Do we have to play rook a5? Because if we, or maybe something else, because if we move the knight somewhere, let's say back to b4, then we'll lose the pawn on a3. Or maybe we should move the rook, which is hanging at the moment. So technically, this is a winning position because of the pawn on e5. So it's an extra pawn, and it's already far advanced. This is a strong pawn chain, which provides us with some strong points. So f6 and d6 can be good strong points for the knight. The d6 is also an outpost. Uh, okay. Okay, so, well, there is a suggestion by John and Jean-Pierre. So Jean-Pierre suggests this move, rook d6, which is, well, which is quite logical. However, then knight c4. This is hanging. Well, and if you do this, it's this. So rook takes, rook b4, and 4 versus 3 in a rook in game may not be winning. So after this move, you can, well, go back, but it still doesn't make much sense because of this move. And if you play knight a6 or knight c6, well, making two pieces hanging, at least they have a check on b1, and then this knight escapes. So that's why doing this move isn't a good idea. Mark Taimanov played rook a5 move. He was able to win this game, but look at how the game continued. This, rook a6, knight takes a3, and knight takes d5. Knight goes to c2, and somehow he managed to win this position. However, after, let's say, a few moves, here, for example, the engine thinks that white is just very slightly better, and if black plays properly, white doesn't win. So doing rook a5 was a mistake, mainly because the pawn on a3 is lost automatically. So the best option was actually the most obvious move, to take on a6. What happens then? Well, this is a winning position, right? We have two extra pawns, and the knight in game is quite simple. Also, the a pawn is a passed pawn. What else can be played? So let's say they play this. They are a pawn down, and then we continue with rook b5, which chases the knight away and allows us to advance the pawn further. So should be winning too. The most logical move that forces us to think is this. Rook to a8. Because if now we, let's say, play this move, then what? So knight c4 probably. Yeah, then, well, yeah, then knight c4. Then knight c4, and if rook goes there, then rook a6, rook a5. But if this move is played, then it's knight b6 or knight b2, and it's just a repetition. So every time the rook decides to go away, the knight is hanging. So if the rook decides to go away, it's better to do here. But then you see it's only one extra pawn in the rook in game. So rook a5 doesn't work. What else we can do? Our rook is under attack, so we can do the same thing for the enemy rook. That's why knight c7. So what happens now? Well, looks like we sacrifice the pawn on a3. Right. Yeah, we do sacrifice, but let's first of all discuss what happens if they take. So they take, we take, and it seems that our knight is completely obstructed. But actually, we are able to bring the king to the game. Well, king f2, king f3, king f4 quite quickly. So let's say this, 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 this. And well, then king d4. And our plan is to play this and knight b6. So we are 2 pawns up, and the knight still escapes. So that's why it's winning. What they can do is just to take. But here, black underestimated. Actually, they both underestimated the consequences after rook d8 move. King goes there, and there is a very nice check on e8. So, well, how to play them? If the king goes to the back rank, it's this. Now, this is a very nice checkmate. If the king goes to the other side, it's not a checkmate, but they lose on h7. And white has 2 pawns up. And also the king is in trouble. There is a lot of activity of white pieces. So what they need to do is to move to h6 right away. Knight goes to f6, threatening with this move. Well, if king g7, again, it's a check on g8 first, and then a rook h8, so gaining the pawn on h7. What do you think black should do in this position to eliminate this opportunity of rook h8? Well, while you're thinking, guys, those of you who is looking for a Zoom link, so you can message me at tricksofchess@gmail.com and ask for it. So I'm not going to publish a Zoom link in a YouTube chat because I don't want everyone to join because last time I did it, there was some inappropriate behavior of people who joined us. So you can message me and I'll send it as a private message to you. Or you can register on our website. Okay, so well, guys, I see the suggestion by John of what black can do in this position to avoid problems with the h7 pawn, but maybe anyone else may suggest anything. Okay, so well, it's obviously this move, right? This move eliminates rook h8, rook h7. Okay, then rook takes a8, knight takes a8, and the key move is knight d5. So this knight is completely trapped because even if black somehow manages to play these moves and exchange the knights, the pawn in game with one extra pawn is completely winning. So by setting the knight on d5, white simply has a very easy win. So king e8, then king e4, and then f5 should be played, as well as knight f6 can be played right away to capture the pawn on h7. Well, here, for example, and this endgame is completely winning. Yes, it's just one pawn, but because of this knight being centralized, this knight is out of the place of action, and you actually can play it as a just a pawn in game because, well, just ignore the knights. Once this knight goes to c7, you exchange it, and that's it. So actually, knight e6, rook e8, and knight c7 was the best thing for white to continue, but they made a mistake and equalized. If you remember, they played this. However, then somehow outplayed black. Okay, so the next example is taken from the game between Garry Kasparov and Anatoly Karpov. So what do you think about this position? Let's calculate the material. It's completely equal. Well, you can try to capture this pawn, but it seems that after the exchange, rook takes a3, and the game is likely to end in a draw. So this knight is very helpful. But there is something that you should notice before decide which exact move to play. If, let's say, you would like to continue with rook h6, then I think it's b5. Well, maybe it's still fine. Yeah, I think it's b5. So rook h7, king e6. Well, and if you decide to sacrifice the rook here, I think they just take the knight first. Okay, so John suggests knight a3 and knight f5. So knight a3 is actually a mistake. Why? Knight goes there, then how to play? Well, e4 is vulnerable. Well, you can play knight f5. Well, you can also play this move, but then knight e4. You can take the second pawn, but then it's rook f2 and you lose here. Knight d6 to stop the king. Check, king goes there, then here, and then after e4, I think it's, well, if this move, it's knight g4. So probably just a check. And, well, if he goes there, there is a pin. If he goes there, there is knight e3 check. So it should be a draw. Knight g4 is still a possibility here. No, it's not because of this move. So knight g4 is a blunder because after king attacks this rook with any of these moves, it's this. No, it's this. This. If the king goes there, then it can be knight b1, and then the knight is lost. Okay, fine. So 93 actually isn't so good, but maybe there is a different idea, or maybe there is an idea of doing knight f5 option. Okay, then king goes there, and I'm about to undermine your knight by capturing the pawn on a4. So you can probably deliver a check, which forces me to go to the back rank, because if this, it's a checkmate here. If this, it's a checkmate on g7. So actually, I have to go there. But e4 is still a problem. Because of which factor do you win? Okay, so 93 is a mistake. Any other suggestions? Well, I actually think that the move is quite obvious here. Well, first of all, this knight on d7 can be easily pinned with rook c7 move, and then we are threatening to take advantage of this pin by doing at least knight b6. The second thing is that you can notice here is that this knight and this rook are located in a distance, at the distance of a knight fork. So if you somehow get rid of this knight and attract the king to this position, this knight fork will win. So the winning move is actually rook c7. How does it work? For example, rook b3, just knight takes b6, and you gain this. If, let's say, they move the king, you take here, and after king takes, it's knight a5 fork. And, of course, this endgame is completely winning. So maybe it makes sense to attack the knight. No, it doesn't, unfortunately. Well, because of several things. So first of all, it's just knight b6, and the knight is protecting the rook. It's possible to attack, but then just this. Everything is safe, and white has enough time to evacuate the knight. So rook c7, and nothing can be done to avoid material losses after this or this move, or even after rook takes d7. Okay, fine. Well, the last example before we continue with the game analysis. What do you think white should play in this position? We have bishops on the board, but take advantage of the white piece's activity. So what do you think? Which move comes to your mind here? Okay, there is a suggestion by Michael. Anybody else? Okay, so guys, I see what you suggest, but nobody suggests the best moves. Well, some moves that you suggested may also win, but do not win as clearly as they can do. Uh, they do not win as clearly as the other move that you also may find in this position. So this is the fourth combination that I want you to find. Okay, let's talk about your suggestion. So first of all, there is knight b8 move, which delivers the fork and actually forces us to take. Then rook takes, definitely. However, after knight f3, which is a check, the king has to move. Otherwise, it's bishop e4 and black is actually winning. King goes d3, knight e1, check. King goes where? If the king goes there, for example, to avoid a repetition, then it's knight c2. And, well, black has a kind of a compensation. This is hanging, this is coming, e4, e3, and then the f pawn goes further. It seems to be quite risky, and these pawns are very slow comparing to the black pieces, comparing to the black pawn activity. So knight b8 doesn't work so well. Well, knight ec5 was a possibility. Well, yes, knight ec5 wins the game too. Well, another move is rook c6. Well, rook c6, they just take on f3 first. You have to move the king, let's say king d3, and then king takes c6. So why do you think this is a winning position? Well, you can play b5, but, well, okay, king b6. If you push, I take. It's not winning. It's even losing. The best move is knight a c5. Why knight a to c5? Well, this move forces black to play only one option, to move the king to c7. Otherwise, they just lose the bishop for free. So king c7, but they still lose this bishop. Rook takes here with a check, king takes, and b5 in this position. Why it is so important? Because then this king has only these two squares. So king c7, knight d6, and he loses the rook, and white ends with extra knight. If king goes there, it's knight d7, and he still loses the rook. Well, in the game, it was king c7, then this, and this. So knight f3, but obviously this is a winning position. King c3, take. Well, the g pawn cannot be promoted because white promotes faster. Well, finally, both queens are promoted, but it's white to move, and white starts with queen f6. So the king moves. Well, doesn't really matter where. With two knights, we are able to deliver a checkmate. So here, check. Here, another check. He goes here. Then it's knight e5. Well, if he goes there, it's a checkmate in two. Actually, no, it's a checkmate in one. So if he goes there, then it is a checkmate in three moves. So this, and finally queen a6. Well, yeah. So knight a to c5, followed with rook takes c6, because then we can gain the rook back. Okay, fine. So before we continue with the analysis of the game that Garry Kasparov played against Vladimir Kramnik, um, let me share the screen. So if you want to support what I'm doing, you can donate using this link. So it works smoothly. You can just click on this link, then click donate, then such a window appears. You enter the amount you want to donate. It can be any amount, and then you can do it through the PayPal. Enter your account, and the such amount will be delivered to my own PayPal account immediately. Okay, the link is here in the chat. Okay, but the first glance, in this position, it's white to move. White loses one of these two pawns. So g3, knight takes h3. Well, knight g4 comes to my mind, but it doesn't seem like a good idea. I don't remember why, but it's just h5, and after knight a3, it's still knight h3. So somehow Garry Kasparov found a way of how to not lose that pawn, neither the g2 nor the h3. Which move do you think Garry Kasparov played here? There is only one move to not lose the pawn. And this idea is based on typical tactics that you can find in Rook and Knight Endgames. So I'm waiting for your suggestions, guys. So, let's decide. There are no suggestions at the moment. So some may consider that G3 is a possibility, then knight H3, and then maybe the knight is trapped. No, it's not. So if this move, the knight escapes to F4, and if you play this move, it's even knight F2. So G3 definitely not. Knight G4, well, knight G4, then it's H5. Maybe there is an intermediate check. So like that. The king goes, well, where? King goes to F8, for example. Oops. To F8. And if you do this, it's Rook G2. So the king escapes to G7. There is no checkmate here. And if you play this move to defend on G2, you still lose the pawn on H3. Also, after this move, it's possible to take right away and then play H5, forcing F3, but then F5. So, however, I think that in case of this mass exchange, the game will still end in a draw because of 4 versus 3 on the queen side. But actually, on that queen side, these 4 pawns are compromised. There is 2 pawns doubled, and that means that it's impossible to convert them to a passed pawn. So it's still likely to end in a draw. But Gary Kasparov played even better. So instead of knight g4, do you have any other suggestions? King f1. Brian, you are almost correct. So king f1 doesn't work because of knight g2. But if rook g2 is played, then you're right, because now there is a possibility of knight d3, distraction. So once the knight takes, they lose the rook. So you're very, very close. Can you improve your suggestion instead of king f1, maybe? Okay, so John was the first. King h1, right. How does it work? So if knight g2 this time, it's rook g1 and there is a pin. So typically there is a possibility of a knight moving back and defending the rook at the same time. But here the rook is on g7 and there is no such option. The rook cannot be protected with the knight retreat. Well, they can try to attack our knight by doing f6 or let's say rook g5, which protects the rook, but then it's knight f3 and the rook is still hanging. If this move, then king takes g2 and the knight is protected. Well, and f6 actually is not doing anything. You can just play knight d3 and this is still a problem which cannot be solved. So knight g2 doesn't work and rook g2 doesn't work neither because of knight d3. The idea of distraction. So with this simple move, king h1, which requires just a few tactical calculations, white solved their problem with the hanging pawn on g2. Let's see how the game continued. Rook g5. No, well, now they want to chase our knight away and still capture there. Because the rook is protected. So if knight d3, for example, it's knight g2. Well, this is a possibility, but then a rook takes c5 and rook takes c2. There is no pin, right? Because the rook is already protected. So here I think that the game would continue with, well, maybe with knight h4. Then rook takes rook, pawn takes knight c5, and it still seems to be a draw. So knight d3 is a possibility, but Gary is playing for a win, so he plays this move. Now if h5, knight goes to e3. g2 is well protected, and there is no possibility of capturing on h3 because the king is on h1 and the g2 pawn is no longer pinned. So rook d5, rook e1 check, king goes there, and knight takes h6. So because of a better pawn structure, white managed to capture this pawn on h6. White sacrificed this, black sacrificed this pawn relying on this idea, rook d2. Now, what would you do in this position? Who can suggest the move? So, another thing you should understand is that, if you want to win rook and knight in game, of course, you should be looking for tactics. This is what we are talking about. But in order to obtain tactical opportunities, your pieces should be active. So that's why the most common rule for most in games where you should centralize and activate your pieces works for a rook and knight endgames too. So how would you proceed here? Okay, I see your suggestion. So knight f5 is a possibility, but what's the purpose? You're not threatening with a checkmate. So, let's say they can capture here. You can probably try this, but then just knight e6 and they cover the d8 square. And you still have two pawns hanging. So knight f5 doesn't seem like a good idea. Okay, rook a4 is interesting. Yeah, rook a4 is a possibility, but then still knight here, and two pawns are hanging. So instead of this move, because I see there is no suggestions, rook e5 was played. So we are taking this, but actually the main idea is to play here. And it would be better if here Kramnik would capture the pawn on c2. The game would continue with rook f5, rook takes f2, but now he loses. He loses the knight. So knight g4. Well, if rook f1, then this, and g3 is coming on the next move. He cannot unpin. For example, king g7, g3, and the knight is lost. So that's why, because he sees that he is losing this knight, he has to lose it for something. So rook g2, rook f4, and rook a2. And this is where white is better with winning chances. But if black plays properly, I think the game still ends in a draw. Because if only black manages to take these two pawns, this in game with rook and king versus rook knight and the king is theoretically drawing. So rook c2 was the best thing, but Kramnik made a mistake. He took on f2. Now rook f5. There is a pin as well as the attack of the f7 pawn. King g7, knight g4, and actually the same thing has to happen, but this time the pawn on a2 is alive. So rook g2, if rook f1, then king h2 with the idea of g3. So rook g2, rook takes f4, rook c2, but comparing to the position we analyzed, there is a pawn on a2. So, and white successfully saves it by doing this move. Rook c3, king g2. So there is a knight for two pawns, and these two are doubled. So b5, then h4, trying to get the pawn to h6. So c4, h5. It's even okay to sacrifice one more pawn. So, for example, rook b3, it's h6. And, if the king goes there, it's this. If the king goes there, then it's rook f6 first. If the king goes further, just h7, and nothing can stop this pawn. So, rook c5 to stop the pawn, h6, king f8. And now, what would you play in this position for white? What do you think? So, because it looks like black is going to stop this pawn by locating their rook on the H file. What do you think you can do? Yeah, guys, thank you. You all are absolutely correct. Knight of 6, which stops this move. So this doesn't work. This doesn't work because there is no possibility of bringing the rook to the H file. So what they did is just a check. But after this check, king goes to H1. And even if the rook somehow manages to go to the H file, there is always rook H2 and nothing can stop the H pawn. So this is how Garry Kasparov in approximately equal position because of tactical means and because of his piece's activity was able to outplay his opponent. So first of all, he defended the pawn on g2 and h3 by doing king h1. And second, by doing rook f5 idea, he created a pin which he took advantage of and obtained extra knight. Okay, so we are done with it. And now we continue with the next part of our webinar. We're gonna play the game. So take a look at this position. You're gonna play with black pieces. And well, while you're thinking, I can send it. Yeah, so this is the position we're gonna play. I can also, well, looks like I send it to John only. Okay. Okay, so this is the position we're gonna play. And this is fan number. We're gonna play it on chess.com. So guys who wants to play it, please send me your usernames here in the chat. Okay, so here I click play. Then again, we choose, well, it should be custom. So it's not standard, it's custom position odds. Then it's 15 plus 10. Then here it's fin, and I enter this number. And then I play with white pieces. So who wants to play? Okay. Parallax 2000. So it's unrated, and I'm playing with white pieces. There is also invite link. So yeah, it's copied. Okay, and here. The challenge is sent. So the link, guys, for you is here. So you can either accept my challenge. Okay, perfect. Rinkins. Okay. Wait, why I'm playing with black pieces? I should be white here. Okay, my mistake. Let's abort it. Okay, guys, just give me a sec. I'll try to fix it. So here I play with white. Yes. And okay, just once again, custom position odds, 15 plus 10, then fin, then I enter this, then I'm playing with white pieces. Okay, and then so parallax. Okay. Please accept. If anyone else wants to play, just send me your username. Okay. Well, I'm again playing with black. How is it possible? Okay, what if I click rematch? No, there is something wrong with this. Okay, just let me try once again. Custom. So here, 15 plus 10. Leave the board. I think it won't help. So this, well, I play as white. White. Yes, perfect, perfect. Okay, who to move? Actually, whose move it is? It's black to move. Ah, okay, thank you. But now I have white anyway. So it's black to move. Parallax, your task is to make the move within 40 seconds. Okay, rook c6. Okay, fine. Well, I think this is a mistake because I have knight a5. Oh. So here I can play king h1 like Gary Kasparov. What else I can do? Okay, I can play g3, then knight goes to d3. Knight takes c4, knight takes e1. Okay, I can do this move right away. And then I take on e5, so the g pawn is not so important. And if I play king f1, it's rook h2, so there is a checkmating threat, which I cannot get rid of. So king h1 is a must. Okay, after rook b2, I'm always tied down to the back rank. So, well, it's either rook c5 attacking this, or it's rook e8 first, king f7, and then rook c8. Okay, let's do a check first, and then rook c8. I'm also about to play rook c7 and capture the pawn on a7. So after we play this game, we're gonna quickly analyze it, and I'll also provide you with the homework. So with the knights on the board, with at least one knight, the position contains a lot of tactical ideas. So, well, here, the most obvious one is that I cannot take this pawn. I cannot use this rook. So once I, let's say, go something here, then I blunder a back rank mate. Okay, so what do I have to do? Okay, my original plan was to pin the knight. G5, right. Now maybe H4. What else I can do? I can deliver a check and take the pawn on A7, but then I lose the one on B2. So H4. Okay, now let me deliver a check. So what can I do? Take on G5, pawn takes, check on G8. This is this check, King H5. If I play this move instead, then there is knight H3 also. Okay, so let me take. And then I wanted to deliver a check. And if I attack this pawn one more time, so knight h3 is likely to be played here, and after this move, I will continue with rook f8, trying to chase this king away. However, I'm not sure what I can do after that. Maybe just rook g2. Maybe rook knight h3, rook g2 right away. What do you think, guys? I can also try rook f8 first. So knight d3 is another opportunity. Oh, knight d3 loses the pawn, so knight e6 is another opportunity, after which I cannot play rook f8, unfortunately. Okay, knight h3 is played. Okay, then okay, let's check. Let's check again. King g6. This is what I didn't expect. I expected the king to go further. Okay, then rook g2. So I actually want to play this move next. If rook c1, then definitely king h2. Well, yeah, what else I have? Nothing else. So probably black takes, I take with the king. King h2. Now, where this knight goes, this is the problem. Because if you play this move, I simply take it. So I think moving the rook was a mistake. You'd better pass the game to the end game, which was definitely winning for me. However, some accurate play is required there. So g4, I take on g4. King here. Yeah, g4. So yeah, I take on g4, and if knight g5, I check with my other rook. So now I think I can play rook g3 or rook g2. I think rook g2 is safer. So rook g2, and where does the knight go? If it goes to g5, I can just pin, or I can check. No, I can pin. Yeah, let's do rook g2. King h3. No, I don't like king h3 because if only I played king h3, oops. If only I played king h3, there was a check from behind, but then I can play king g2. So actually, Brian was correct. It is possible to play king h3 move. Okay, but anyway, rook g2, because I'm threatening with a checkmate. That was my key idea. And if knight g5, then I can check, king goes there, I can check again and take on g5. Or maybe actually I just play rook f5. Okay, yeah, thank you for the game. And let's go back because I think you didn't find the key idea, which was actually found by Anatoly Karpov. Mm, So here we are. Well, rook c6 is definitely a mistake, but we cannot ignore this threat. Well, knight d3 was played. And now how to play? Because, well, if rook goes further, rook c1 is a checkmate. So let's say rook e3, rook c1, and this is a checkmate. Right? So that's why. Well, for example, rook goes there, and after that, it's just possible to play this move, and the knight is obstructed while these two pawns are under attack. The game here continued with knight d6. So knight takes e1, knight takes c4. But then there was a tactical opportunity. Well, if rook c4, it's likely to be approximately equal. But if you play knight c2, then this knight is vulnerable. The rook is hanging too. There is no possibility to attack because then rook takes and the knight is protected. So that means that white has to attack the black rook anyway. Rook d8. Now, again, two pieces are hanging. So knight b7 is the only move because if, let's say, this move is played, then you can successfully take advantage of the pin by doing what? By doing which move? Well, who can suggest which move we can play here? Yes, thanks. It's knight d4. Why? How does knight d4 works? Because it seems it's only attack the knight on d6, but if the knight goes, let's say here to take advantage of the pin, there is a fork on e2 or even on f3. So takes this, king goes there, and the position is completely losing. Well, maybe a6 makes more sense, but anyway, it's still losing for white. So that's why knight b7 is the only move. Uh, well, this time doing this doesn't work because after rook c1, You take, they can take. The rook is on the b file, so there is no back rank mate. For example, if let's say they played rook c1 in this position, then after rook d6, this knight is poisoned because of the back rank idea. So knight b7, and looks like this doesn't work because of rook c1, right? So you take, they take, and it's fine. So that's why instead you may activate your rook by going to the second rank. Well, doing passive defense would be the best thing for white. They didn't play, so they decided to play this move. And after knight d4, there is a threat of a fork. So the game continued with rook c8, king h7, and an escape square for the king. But then it's rook b2. So this having the rook on the second rank provided a black with a lot of opportunities. And well, getting the rook to the second rank was mainly because of these tactical opportunities, because of the forks and the back rank, and because of two pieces, two white pieces were almost always under the attack. So this tried to capture this pawn, and knight e2 check. Well, if the king goes there, after knight f4, there is a mating threat. And even g3 doesn't help, so the king has to go there, which seems like a tempo loss. That's why instead the king goes to h2 directly. However, after knight f4, it's still king g1. Knight d3, attacking f2. Well, pushing this pawn is even a mistake, because then g2 becomes vulnerable, and if g3, the king is cut off. So knight d6, trying to attack these two pawns. Knight takes f2, rook takes a7. So this move is coming. How would you continue for black in this position? Right. It's knight to g4. Well, it's not king g6 because, well, king g6, I think they can play rook b7 just. No, 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 no. Then h5, and they take on g7 once you do this. So it's knight g4. You're threatening with a mate, so there is no time to play this. So they have to defend against the back rank mate, and then after knight a3, this is no longer a possibility. There is a possibility of playing this move, knight e8, but rook g2 is another threat. The king has to go to the corner, and now the g7 pawn is protected. Is it? Yeah, it is, because after this move, the king escapes here. Not here, because of the checkmate, right? So, but to g6. Well, it's not the end. It's rook g7, king g7, knight h5. King g6, knight g3, but it is a winning position, right? We gain this pawn, and because of this too, we are completely winning. So king h1 was played. King escapes to g6, and again, so doing h5 with the idea of exchanging the h pawn for the g pawn was a good idea. So rook b7. Rook goes to d2. The knight is under attack. That's why the knight has to take. And knight takes f5, attacking both. So g4 was played, knight takes h4. And now, if let's say white decides to continue with a4, how would you continue? This knight f3, this is a typical pattern which is called Arabian mate, so you may remember it. That's why king g1 is a must. But king g1 means that they also lose the other pawn. So rook g4, in order to promote this, rook a7 has to be played, then knight f5. Well, they try to promote, but actually the H pawn is promoted faster. So rook e8 has to be played to get this pawn and actually just h3. So I think the white's idea was based on rook h8 move, but here rook h8 fails because of knight h6 at least. And the g rook is required to stay on the g file to stop the enemy king. So now this, but black promotes first, and this is a check. Well, you stop the pawn as well as you just checkmate in a few moves here. So once again, the key idea here was to play knight d3 to be able to let them take, but attack the rook and be able to capture the knight, which provoked them to play the only moves. And at a certain moment, when the knight went to b7, which is not actually a pleasant position for the knight, the rook was able to enter the second rank. And because of the rook and knight activity, black was playing for a win. And finally, after this mistake, the position became completely winning. The rest was just technique. Okay, fine, guys. So we are done for today. We did this. We did play the games. We did analyze a lot of tactical opportunities that you may remember. Okay. Actually, guys, who is Spanish speaking on this webinar? Because there was a Zoom a notification that someone asked for Spanish subtitles. Okay, so as for the homework, there is a homework. Let me open it and show. So this is the homework. There are two positions. And well, in the first one, I want you to find a tactical strike to gain the material. As for the second one, well, there is also a very simple tactical strike. The second one is easier than the first one. So I'm waiting for your suggestions. You can message me at tricksofchess@gmail.com. So also there will be an email tomorrow. I'm going to send you what I was, well, I'm going to send you the recording for those of you who missed it. And I will include this homework, of course. So all answers can be sent to my email, tricksofchess@gmail.com. Well, you do have any questions? So, and finally, so those of you who joined our webinar recently, so if you want to donate and support my webinars, my activity and the content that I create, you can do it by using this link. So here you click donate and you are able to donate any amount directly to my PayPal account. Everything works smoothly and clearly. So like that, you enter your account and then you then you send the payment directly to my PayPal. So this is the link. I can copy this link to the chat. Also, okay, so then we are done for today and hope to see everyone next Sunday, same time. Bye-bye.